Imagine a factory that stores one of the most lethal chemicals ever manufactured. Now imagine that factory turns off its refrigeration system to save $37 a day in electricity. Imagine the gas scrubber designed to neutralize leaks has been downsized to a fraction of its needed capacity. Imagine the flare tower that is supposed to burn off escaping gas has been disconnected for weeks. Imagine the water curtain meant to knock down toxic clouds cannot even reach the top of the structures where gas would escape. Now imagine this factory sits in the middle of a city of 900,000 people, with shanty towns built right up against its walls. On the night of December 2, 1984, approximately 40 tons of methyl isocyanate gas leaked from the Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India. A cloud of poison drifted over the sleeping city. People woke choking, blinded, gasping for air. They ran into the streets, but there was nowhere to run. Between 8,000 and 16,000 people died. Over 500,000 were exposed. It is the worst industrial disaster in human history. And every single safety system that could have prevented it had been turned off to save money. Union Carbide Corporation was an American chemical company headquartered in Danbury, Connecticut. In 1969, it built a pesticide formulation plant in Bhopal, the capital of Madhya Pradesh state in central India. The plant produced 7, a widely used insecticide, using a chemical called methyl isocyanate, known as mic. Mic is extraordinarily dangerous. It is highly toxic, extremely reactive with water, and heavier than air, meaning that when it escapes, it sinks to the ground and flows along the surface like an invisible river of death. Exposure causes severe burning of the eyes, lungs, and skin. In high concentrations, it destroys lung tissue and causes death within minutes. The Bhopal plant was designed with multiple safety systems specifically because mic is so dangerous. There were 6 primary layers of defense. First, a refrigeration system to keep the mic stored at low temperatures, reducing the chance of a runaway reaction. Second, a gas scrubber that could neutralize escaping mic by washing it with caustic soda. Third, a flare tower that could burn off gas that passed through the scrubber. Fourth, a water curtain system that could spray water high enough to knock down any gas cloud before it left the plant boundaries. Fifth, spare mic storage tanks that could receive contents if a primary tank had problems. And sixth, instrumentation to monitor tank temperature and pressure in real time. By December 1984, every single one of these systems had been compromised. The plant had been losing money for years. The Indian pesticide market had not grown as Union Carbide expected. Demand for 7 was far below projections. The company responded the way companies always respond to unprofitable operations. They cut costs. And at a chemical plant, cutting costs means cutting safety. The refrigeration system for the mic storage tanks had been shut off months earlier. The Freon coolant had been drained and used elsewhere. The system that kept mic at a safe temperature of near 0 degrees Celsius was simply not operating. Saving approximately $37 per day in electricity costs. The gas scrubber had been redesigned and downsized. It was now capable of handling pressures far below what a serious mic release would generate. In the event of a major leak, the scrubber would be overwhelmed almost immediately. The flare tower had been disconnected for maintenance. A section of pipe connecting the mic system to the flare tower had been removed and never replaced. Even if gas reached the flare tower, it could not be burned off. The water curtain system, the last line of defense, had water cannons that could only spray about 15 meters high. The mic storage tanks and their vent lines were higher than this. Any gas escaping from the top of the system would sail right over the water curtain untouched. The spare mic tank, which should have been empty and available to receive a transfer, already contained mic. There was nowhere to move the chemical if something went wrong. And the instrumentation was unreliable. Gauges had been malfunctioning for weeks. Workers had learned to distrust the readings, and some instruments had simply been ignored. The plant was also chronically understaffed. A maintenance team that once had 12 members had been cut to 6. The mic production unit that once had 12 operators per shift now had 6. Training had been reduced. Experienced workers had been transferred or laid off. Many of the remaining operators did not fully understand the chemistry of the processes they were managing. On the evening of December 2, 1984, a routine maintenance procedure called water washing was being performed on the mic system piping. Workers were flushing water through pipes to clean them. A critical slip blind, a metal disc designed to isolate the pipes being washed from the mic storage tanks, was either missing, improperly installed, or leaking. Water entered a storage tank designated E610, which contained approximately 42 tons of mic. Mic reacts violently with water. The reaction is exothermic, meaning it generates tremendous heat. As water mixed with the mic in tank E610, the temperature began climbing rapidly. The chemical reaction produced carbon dioxide and other gases, building pressure inside the tank. The temperature, which should have been near 0 degrees if the refrigeration had been working, rose past 200 degrees Celsius. At approximately 11 p.m., the pressure in tank E610 exceeded the capacity of the safety valve. The valve opened, releasing mic vapor into the vent gas scrubber line. The gas hit the scrubber. The scrubber, undersized and not properly charged with caustic soda, failed to neutralize the gas. The flare tower was disconnected. The water curtain was activated but could not reach the height of the escaping gas cloud. 40 tons of methyl isocyanate gas poured out of the plant and into the atmosphere over the city of Bhopal. The gas, being denser than air, settled close to the ground. It formed a low-lying cloud that drifted southeast with the light wind, directly into the most densely populated neighborhood surrounding the plant. These were poor communities, shanty towns where families slept in small rooms with no sealed windows and no way to escape quickly. People woke unable to breathe. The mic attacked their eyes, causing immediate and intense burning. Many were temporarily or permanently blinded. It attacked their lungs, filling them with fluid. It attacked their skin. Thousands of people ran into the streets in panic, but running increased their breathing rate, causing them to inhale more of the gas. Those who ran were often more severely affected than those who stayed low to the ground or covered their faces with wet cloth. The scenes in Bhopal that night were apocalyptic. Entire families were found dead in their homes. People collapsed in the streets. Hospitals were overwhelmed within minutes, and doctors had no idea what chemical they were dealing with. Union Carbide initially refused to disclose the exact composition of the gas, citing trade secrets. By the time medical teams understood they were dealing with mic, thousands had already died. The immediate death toll in the first 72 hours was approximately 3,800 people, according to the Indian government's initial count. But this number is widely considered a severe undercount. Independent investigations and later government reports estimate between 8,000 and 16,000 people died within the first 2 weeks. Over 500,000 people were exposed to the gas. Tens of thousands suffered permanent injuries including chronic respiratory disease, blindness, immune system damage, and neurological disorders. Birth defects and elevated cancer rates in Bhopal continued for decades after the disaster. Warren Anderson, the CEO of Union Carbide, flew to India on December 7, 5 days after the disaster. He was arrested by Indian police upon arrival on charges of negligence and criminal corporate liability. He posted bail and was allowed to leave the country. He never returned to India to face trial. An Indian court issued an arrest warrant for Anderson, but the United States never extradited him. He lived quietly in retirement in the Hamptons, New York, until his death in 2014 at age 92. He was never held personally accountable for the deaths in Bhopal. In 1989, Union Carbide settled with the Indian government for $470 million. For a disaster that killed thousands, poisoned hundreds of thousands, and contaminated land and groundwater that remains polluted to this day, the settlement worked out to approximately $500 per victim. The settlement was widely condemned as grossly inadequate. Union Carbide was later acquired by Dow Chemical in 2001. Dow has consistently maintained that all liabilities were settled in the 1989 agreement and has refused to accept further responsibility for cleanup or compensation. The Bhopal plant site remains contaminated. Toxic chemicals continue to leach into the groundwater. Children born in surrounding neighborhoods still show elevated rates of birth defects and developmental disorders more than 4 decades after the disaster. In 2010, an Indian court convicted 7 former Union Carbide India employees of negligence, sentencing them to 2 years in prison, the maximum allowed under the charges. 2 years. For the worst industrial disaster in human history. Most were released on bail and never served meaningful time. The Bhopal disaster exposed a fundamental truth about industrial safety in developing countries. Union Carbide's mic plants in the United States operated with significantly more safety equipment, better staffing, and stricter protocols than the Bhopal facility. The same company applied different safety standards based on where the plant was located and how much money was at stake. When the Bhopal plant became unprofitable, they did not close it. They did not reduce the amount of deadly chemicals stored on site. They simply turned off the safety systems one by one to reduce operating costs. Every layer of protection was designed to prevent exactly what happened. The refrigeration would have slowed the reaction. The scrubber would have neutralized the gas. The flare tower would have burned what the scrubber missed. The water curtain would have knocked down what escaped. Any single system working properly might have prevented the disaster. Instead, all of them were disabled, and 40 tons of one of the deadliest chemicals on Earth poured over a sleeping city of 900,000 people. The lesson of Bhopal is not complicated. When you store one of the most dangerous chemicals ever manufactured next to a city of nearly 1 million people, every safety system must work. Not most of them. Not the cheap ones. All of them. Because the moment you start asking which safety system you can afford to turn off, you have already decided that some number of deaths is an acceptable cost of doing business. In Bhopal, that number turned out to be 16,000.